There is a specific kind of loneliness that only exists in the security room of a condemned building. A silence that feels heavy and manufactured, smelling of stale coffee and heated electronics. Marcus was not a man, easily spooked, having spent 20 years working the graveyard shift in various warehouses and malls, finding comfort in the detachment of watching the world through a glass lens. The Helix building was scheduled for demolition on Monday morning, a brutalist concrete structure that had once housed 1,000 busy workers but now stood as a hollow shell awaiting the wrecking ball. His instructions from the property management firm were unusual but specific. He was to review the last 24 hours of CCTV footage to ensure no squatters or urban explorers were hiding in the structure before the explosives were set. It was a formality, a liability check to ensure the company didn't accidentally bring the building down on top of a sleeping homeless person or a rebellious teenager. Marcus sat in the basement control room, surrounded by a wall of monitors that hummed with a low-frequency buzz, the only source of light in the subterranean darkness. He inserted the master drive and began the playback, watching the timestamp on the bottom right corner tick forward from midnight, the grainy black and white images flickering across the screens. For the first 3 hours of the recording, the building was dead, a stillness so absolute that it looked like a photograph rather than a video feed. He watched dust motes dance in the infrared light of the main lobby, mesmerizing in their monotony as he sipped his lukewarm coffee and fought the urge to doze off. Then, at 3:14, on the timecode, something shifted on camera for the feed covering the north entrance of the lobby, a subtle disruption in the pixelated shadows. A figure was standing in the center of the frame, appearing not as if it had walked there, but as if it had simply coalesced out of the static and the gloom. Marcus leaned forward, squinting at the monitor, his fingers hovering over the zoom controls, trying to make sense of the silhouette standing perfectly still in the empty atrium. The intruder was male, of average build, wearing a dark security uniform that blended poorly with the marble floor, but he wasn't moving to steal anything or vandalize the walls. He was just standing there, facing the camera directly, his head tilted up at an unnatural angle, as if he knew exactly where the lens was hidden in the ceiling tiles. This broke the first rule of security monitoring. Intruders usually try to hide, to blend in, to avoid the gaze of the machine. But this figure was performing for it. Marcus checked the other camera feeds, expecting to see accomplices, but the rest of the building was empty. The figure was alone in the vast, echoing tomb of the Helix. He fast-forwarded the tape, expecting the figure to leave or move toward the elevators, but the timestamp sped up while the figure remained frozen, a statue in a stream of time. It wasn't until the tape reached 4 o'clock that the figure moved, and it didn't walk. The camera feed flickered with a burst of static, and when the image stabilized, the figure was gone from the lobby. Marcus scanned the bank of monitors, his heart rate climbing slightly, until he found the figure again on camera 12, located on the 5th floor landing. The entity had moved 5 floors up in a split second, bypassing the stairs and the elevators, yet it maintained that same rigid, staring posture. Again, the face was angled directly at the camera lens, the eyes hidden in the low-resolution shadow of a cap, locking eyes with Marcus through the digital divide. A creeping sense of unease began to crawl up Marcus's spine because the behavior felt intelligent, deliberate, and mocking. "Who are you?" Marcus whispered to the empty room, his voice sounding small against the hum of the servers. He continued to scrub through the footage, and a terrifying pattern emerged. The figure was moving systematically closer to the basement, floor by floor, camera by camera. It was a hunting pattern, a slow descent into the bowels of the building, where the security office and Marcus were located. On the 10th floor, the figure raised a hand and checked an invisible watch on its wrist, a gesture so casual and human that it made the situation infinitely more disturbing. Marcus looked down at his own wrist instinctively, checking the time, and realized with a jolt that he had performed that exact same gesture only moments ago. He shook his head, dismissing the thought as paranoia, telling himself that exhaustion was making his mind draw connections that weren't there. But as the figure appeared on the 3rd floor, the clarity of the footage improved slightly, allowing Marcus to see details of the uniform the intruder was wearing. It was a standard issue, security jacket with a patch on the left shoulder, the same company logo that was currently stitched onto Marcus's own chest. "It's a prank," he muttered, his hands trembling as he reached for his radio. "Someone from the day shift is messing with the archives." But the radio offered only static, a white noise that sounded like ocean waves crashing against a jagged shore, cutting him off from the world outside. He looked back at the screen. The figure was now in the main hallway of the basement, standing just outside the heavy steel door of the security room. The timestamp on the screen read 5:45, a time that, according to Marcus's watch, was still 20 minutes away in the future. He froze, his brain trying to process the impossibility of the numbers. He was watching a recording of a future that hadn't happened yet. This wasn't a live feed, and it wasn't an old archive. It was a premonition encoded in magnetic tape, a memory of an event waiting to be born. On the screen, the figure in the hallway slowly reached up and removed the cap, revealing a face illuminated by the harsh fluorescent buzz of the corridor lights. Marcus stopped breathing as he looked at the monitor, staring into the pixelated eyes of his own face, a perfect, mirror-image reflection. The Marcus on the screen looked tired, terrified, and pale, his eyes wide with the knowledge of something terrible, staring directly into the camera lens outside the door. But the on-screen Marcus wasn't looking at the camera, he was looking through it, as if he could see the present-day Marcus sitting in the chair on the other side. Present-day Marcus stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the concrete floor, backing away from the wall of monitors as if they were radioactive. He looked at the heavy steel door of the security room, the real door, and then back at the screen where his future self was standing in front of that same door. The video. Marcus raised his hand and knocked on the steel door. 3 slow, deliberate raps that carried no sound on the muted tape. A second later, 3 loud, metallic booms echoed through the real security room, vibrating the walls and shaking the dust from the ceiling. Boom, boom, boom. Marcus screamed, a sound that was swallowed instantly by the soundproofing of the room, and scrambled into the corner, grabbing a flashlight as a pathetic weapon. He looked back at the screen, desperate to see what his future self would do next, hoping for a clue on how to escape the loop. The Marcus on the screen reached for the door handle, turning it slowly, and the camera angle shifted, glitching out for a second before switching to the interior camera, the one filming the room Marcus was currently standing in. On the monitor, he saw the back of his own head in the corner of the room, powering with a flashlight, and he saw the door open, but nothing walked through the door on the screen. Instead, the video feed began to dissolve into pure visual noise, a chaotic storm of black and white. Then, the text overlay on the bottom of the screen changed, the date flipping forward 1 more day to tomorrow's date. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The footage he was watching wasn't a warning. It was the final entry in the archive. He wasn't watching an intruder break-in. He was watching the recording of his own ghost, trapped in the loop of the building's memory. The knocking came again, louder this time, demanding entrance, shaking the hinges of the door that stood between him and the corridor. Marcus realized that if he opened the door, he would find nothing there. But if he stayed, he would become the footage he was terrified of. The paradox was closing in. To exist, the footage needed a subject, and the building had chosen him to fill the empty frames. He looked at the timestamp one last time, 6 a.m., the exact moment the demolition charges were set to detonate on Monday morning. But today was Sunday. Or at least, he had thought it was Sunday when he walked in, but the isolation of the room had blurred the lines of the calendar. The phone on the desk rang, a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the panic, and Marcus lunged for it, hoping for a human voice. "Hello," he gasped into the receiver. "Is anyone there? I'm trapped in the basement. We can't see you." "Marcus," a voice crackled on the other end, sounding like his own voice played in reverse. "You're not on the monitors anymore. I'm right here," he yelled. "I'm watching myself on the screen. I'm right outside the door." "No," the voice replied calmly. "You are the footage. We are just watching you fade out." The line went dead, and simultaneously, all the monitors in the room went black, plunging him into total darkness save for the green glow of the exit sign. In the silence, the door handle began to turn, slowly, agonizingly, just as it had on the tape. Marcus understood then that he wasn't a security guard anymore. He was a ghost story being written in real time, a glitch in the reality of the Helix building. He didn't try to run, he simply straightened his jacket, adjusted his cap, and turned to face the camera in the corner of the ceiling. He stared into the lens, knowing that somewhere, someone, another version of himself was watching this moment, terrified and confused. He wanted to warn him, to tell him to leave before the shift started, so he held the stare, trying to push his thoughts through the wire. The door swung open, revealing not a hallway, but a blinding wall of white static, the visual representation of nothingness. Marcus stepped into the static, not because he wanted to, but because the tape had reached its end, and the recording had to stop. The room was empty when the demolition crew arrived the next morning, save for a cup of cold coffee and a chair knocked over in the corner. They checked the CCTV drives for safety, scanning the final 24 hours, but they found only static, corrupted files that refused to play, except for one single frame, frozen at the very end of the reel, a glitch that looked vaguely like a face screaming in the dark. They deleted it to clear the drive space, unwittingly erasing the last trace of Marcus from existence. The building came down at 9 a.m., collapsing into a pile of rubble and history, taking its secrets into the dust. But sometimes, on the backup servers in the cloud, a file reappears on its own, tagged with a date that hasn't happened yet. And if you watch it closely, you can see a man sitting in a dark room, realizing that the camera isn't there to protect him, it is there to capture his soul. So the next time you see a security camera blinking red in an empty hallway, remember, it might not be recording what is happening now. It might be waiting for you to catch up to the horror it has already seen.